Well, welcome everybody to this panel where we are going to explore the intersection between quantum computing and healthcare and life science, and specifically, what are the applications of quantum computing, or more broadly, quantum technologies for this sector. Here today, I have the pleasure and the honor to be joined by Matthew Versaggi, who is a Senior Director of Artificial Intelligence and Distinguished Engineer at Optum Technologies at UnitedHealth Group. Gopal Karemore, who is a Principal Data Scientist for Novo Nordisk. Chana, who is a Director of Computational Platforms at Merck, and then Amrita Manzari, who is an associate manager of software engineering at UnitedHealth Group. And of course, all of you, all the audience that we are all thrilled to be sharing with you this moment, these minutes. And let's get started. Well, I have a question for all of our panelists, which is that lately it seems to be quite an interest around the intersection of quantum technologies and its applications in healthcare and life science. And the question I would like to pose to all of you is, what can quantum technologies bring to healthcare and life science? And Amrita, I'm looking so much forward to hear your insights on this question.
Yeah, thank you so much, Esperanza. And I mean, it's kind of an honor with all the people, all the brilliant minds over here. So for your question, I have actually quite a bit of experience with the healthcare industry. I mean, all my engineering that I have been, all my experience is shared in the healthcare industry. So if I talk about healthcare and life sciences, these are two distinct sort of terms with many commonalities. Like if you go to the healthcare umbrella, you have, several distinct fields, like you have this clinical area, you have this insurance area, you have this e-commerce area, you have an actuarial body. Similarly, the life sciences, you have this drug discovery area, or, all your molecular chemical simulation area, So how quantum can actually bring or, impact the healthcare and life sciences? There are many different areas where that can be used, especially if I talk about the healthcare industry and the life science commonalities. The very first can be your precision medicine area. Obviously, it's not gonna take 2 years to entirely, commercialize the concept of precision medicine through the quantum computing concepts. But yeah, I think I'm pretty sure in the coming 5 years or 6 or 7 years, with which we have some some sort of let's say 1,000 qubit quantum computing computers in our system, right? So precision medicine can be a very interesting area to look upon. By the second can be your drug discovery, which is a part of your life science area, drug discovery, and it can further go into the genomics area. So genomics is going to play a very, very significant role in both your drug discovery area plus your precision medicine area, because understanding the human gene and how it is kind of interacting with the traits of the particular disease type will be very important in understanding the personalized way of medicine. The third, and I think the very crucial, can be data security. I mean, we play with a lot of data every day. It's a huge, immense data that we actually play with the end consumers, and we have all those data storage for the end consumers, for the patients, for whoever is kind of entering in our system. We are having all their personal details. So data security, I mean, is going to be major with the coming of post-quantum safe algorithms, with the presence of, with the coming algorithms in QKD. ID Quantique is doing an incredible job in quantum random number generators. So I think in the next coming, maybe the later part of this decade, I mean, once, if we go by the Google roadmap and IBM roadmap of 1 million qubit quantum computer, I think the later 5 years of this decade is going to be quite interesting, especially in the data security.
Yeah, so I agree.
So I think these areas gonna be incredible in terms of how quantum computing can be utilized in healthcare and the life science area. Yep.
Yeah, I share your views, and later on we will explore with you also. We will talk a little bit more in detail about the data part. And now, Cam, what is your take on this question?
First, thank you to Quantum Tech for inviting me back to this, and for the panel here. Should be a good discussion. Excuse me. Yeah, so I mean, for our industry, this is a natural fit, right? Particularly in the early discovery phase, where obviously we do a lot of simulation around molecules and et cetera. But as this technology has matured and the use cases have matured, we're actually looking at problems now also later in the discovery pipeline and moving into supply chain, et cetera. So for us, it's a very natural fit. But just like everybody else, we're sort of on the frontier here, and really trying to find those use cases that have more immediate impact and a quicker ROI, and then preparing ourselves obviously for the time when these machines are really more mature and larger for those bigger problems that that we'll start tackling. Yeah, fascinating, and I'm following you close the work that you guys are doing at Merck, and it's fascinating and very, very interesting. Matt, how do you see this question?
Lots of different facets, but first would love to say big shout out to Quantum.Tech for having us back as well. I was with Cam last year. Just some super people here, liking the fact that we've got QSI on this panel as well. So great presence there. So big shout out to those folks for being here. And the way I'd answer this question is the question is, hey, what does quantum bring to healthcare and life sciences? I would look at what they're already bringing to healthcare and life science. A lot of times just an articulation of that. But before that, there's a reminder. Healthcare is a very conservative, highly risk adverse industry, focusing intensely on short-term ROI aspects of their business with a penchant towards growing by acquisition, not growing by innovation. And they're essentially a finance company at its core. That's a very different stripe than the life sciences group, which are, they take innovation, they can take and tolerate risks, and they spend large sums on R&D space. So when we say, what does quantum bring to this group? You can't lump them both together. They're not the same thing. So with that in mind, just look at some of the things that's already being done. Anthem, as opposed, one of our biggest competitors, they're using quantum computing looking at things like longitudinal population health modeling. It's a big deal over there. The German Cancer Research Group is looking at using quantum computing for personalized medicine on the cancer space, the cancer side of the house. The Cleveland Clinic bought the first quantum computer from IBM and stuck it in their basement. Yeah. That's a big deal. I mean, how many people love to have a quantum computer sit in your basement? I would, for one.
Yeah, me too.
Because then you'd all come to my house and we would get together more often. But they're using, and this is important, they're using AI and other technologies along with quantum to solve these problems of note. So that's kind of a key thing. Other life sciences companies are, in 2020, they spent, 31% of the population of those life science companies started engaging in quantum. And in 2021, another almost 40% began that journey as well. They're leading the way. I would say the healthcare companies are probably going to follow in some sense. Other aspects, fraud detection with quantum machine learning. Amrita, you can be following up on lots of that. The medical IoT space is going to be huge. So IoT is one thing, but medical IoT is a bigger thing for us because there's all kinds of things getting attached to all kinds of other things. Security is a big issue there. There's a burgeoning ecosystem coming in from there. Precision medicine we talked about as well. So with that, Esperanza, I will punt it back to you.
Yeah, and I love especially how you draw a parallelism between healthcare and life science and finance. My background is in finance, and when you were talking, I was feeling very related to what you were saying. And Gopal, please share your views on this question.
My pleasure. Hello, everyone. I know all the good words are actually taken by all my previous speakers. So it's very difficult to be a part of a last speaker.
No.
But thank you very much to Quantum Tech for inviting me. It's amazing panel discussion we're having. But to answer your question, right, what is the impact of quantum in life science? I think we need to step back and ask one question, right? Like, what is the bottleneck of classical domain that we have, like all the computational technique that we use? Because unless we answer this question, it is very difficult to evaluate the impact of quantum in life science. And to evaluate impact of any technology is going to be difficult. And as I know Matt said, in a life science settings, in the pharma settings, it is very difficult because it's a long process, it's a convoluted, and it's a non-linear, right? And it takes a couple of years to really evaluate the performance of any technology, be it AI or quantum. But what I personally feel is that you need to understand the quantum application in life science in two ways: a preclinical application and a clinical application. So just to point out some application in a preclinical domain, like, all the drug development process starts with target identification. Really an amazing task. It's a very cumbersome task, NP class of problems, because a huge amount of data is available, genomics, phenomics, metabolomics, right? And all kind of data that is available, unstructured data. Mm-hmm. And this comes under the NP class problem. And these are really a good beneficiary for a quantum computer, right? That's one part, and also the systems biology problems, systems pharmacology problems, right? All these data set that boils down to unstructured data, graph problems, sparse matrix, that can be solved by quantum computer, right? The second part is a protein folding, for example, right? We have seen some examples. The IBM guys have actually published paper with the 7 amino acids and 10 amino acid protein folding problem using the variational quantum eigensolver. This is really amazing, right? This can be extended if you have a more number of qubits. Somebody mentioned about the simulation part. I think this is really challenging task in pharma, because what we are actually given is the 10 to the power 60 chemical space, which is basically even more than the Avogadro's number, right? Or even the number of galaxies or stars available in a Milky Way galaxy. So really find a one chemical which would go from from laboratory to the patient. It is really a difficult task, because you have so many properties that you need to optimize, and then it basically relates to satisfiability problem, multi-objective optimization problem. Which is really a nice problem for Ising model type of Hamiltonian solving using adiabatic quantum computer. So it's really amazing. And then again, going back to the clinical side, the stratification of the clinical, the patients for the clinical trials, because one of the problem that we have in a clinical trial is to have the covariance, right? The confounding factors across the patients. So can we use quantum computer to effectively select the patient who would get best benefit, so that the attrition rate of clinical trial will reduce, right? And the last point is about the distribution cycle, right? Because that's kind of a traveling salesman kind of problem, because how do you distribute your drug in a most efficient way? We have seen in a corona pandemic, right? Vaccine delivery, it's a great problem. So I think there is a lot of promises by the quantum computer. I'm very hopeful actually. This one.
And thank you so much, Gopal, for your answer. Very comprehensive one to see all the different parts where quantum computing can contribute. And now that we are talking, and you have your background as a data scientist, and it's an honor to hear your insights about how could quantum computing work towards Novo Nordisk purpose to defeat diabetes, and especially thinking about the intersection of quantum and artificial intelligence.
Intersection of artificial intelligence, what we are talking is about the quantum machine learning. This is really a nice hope, right? Because if you really see the application domain of a quantum computer, it is divided into three aspects. One is a simulation, optimization, and whether or not it will get an advantage to the AI, which is basically machine learning, because that's a horsepower, right? So for the quantum machine learning, there is a session just after this panel, I'm going to give a half an hour talk only for quantum machine learning. So please feel free to join it. But just to give you answer, there are so many promising machine learning techniques that has been developed in a quantum realm, especially the NISQ era that we are living in. And they have shown a promising result as compared to what we have in a classical domain, especially the sampling techniques, the generative models, right? Boltzmann machine, quantum machine learning. The NLP part is also very important, especially if you really go by the real world evidence or the genomics, phenomics from the text data. I think these are the problems which are actually NP class of problems, because as I said before, you basically gets a huge matrix, and the matrix inversion is really a difficult job in linear algebra, which basically a workhorse for all machine learning algorithms, right? Inverse Fourier transform. And we have so many routines, subroutines, which people have developed and proposed in a quantum machine learning or quantum computing domain, where, of course, there are some dependencies on the QRAM and all, but there are so many hopes which is available. So that we can utilize quantum machine learning in a drug discovery. In
that domain, and it's amazing to see such a clear impact. And also, speaking of impact and exploring, I would like to ask you, Cam, if there are some specific use cases that you could share and that you could find that are of interest for your company.
Yeah, so really, for us, the problems sort of fall into 2 or 3 categories, depending on how you classify the problem space. So there's the simulation space, optimization, and then graph problems, and arguably graph problems could be optimization, but there are other graph problems that are not necessarily optimization. And so really it's in these 3 areas that we're looking at. And as I mentioned in early discovery, quantum chemistry, quantum mechanics has been part and parcel of everything that we do there, whether it's ab initio semi-empirical calculations, or it's involving quantum generated descriptors or values as part of a classical calculation, right? So it's sort of in that space, it's a very natural fit, right? Now the challenge that we have is that when we're running simulations on quantum systems, even the largest system that we can work with on a quantum system is nowhere near a small drug-like molecule, right? Google recently had up to 12 hydrogen atoms or whatever it was, whatever the state is at the moment, right? So that's, it's getting there, right? And so the question is, okay, given the state today, how can we apply the technology? And so there are, approaches here where we can still say, okay, well, how about, using quantum computing to maybe look at the fragments, augment classical methods. So whether that's augmenting, simulations, or it's augmenting calculation for better force fields, etc. Right? So in that space, it's a very it's augmenting the classical method or the traditional method that we've got at the moment. But at the same time, we continue exploring, even at a small scale, how can we run de novo simulations with the promise that, we will get better and larger machines. And then later in the discovery pipeline, and Gopal touched on some of this, where again it's either optimization for things like clinical trial design, or even further on in manufacturing and distribution, we're looking at how can we apply like the traveling salesman to distribute our products. Again, there some of the challenges aren't necessarily that we can't apply this problem. It's for us, our supply chain isn't like it used to be 40, 50 years ago, from the manufacturer straight to the drugstore, right? There's many other steps in between. So again, you can apply the problem in small pieces, but you know, if we're not at that stage now where we're looking at the possibility, then I think you know, we're not really setting ourselves up for success in the future.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's great, Cam, and I loved about the answer that it's very realistic in the sense that you talk about the potential and you also talk about the challenges and where we are now. It's very important to be realistic about the technology and avoid hyping. And you also, oh, sorry, please go on.
Yeah, and one other point that I'll add here is that you know, I think some of the buy-in or the challenge that we have with the buy-in is that you know, we're still looking at a pure quantum system, right? And the reality is that you know, even 20 years from now, it's still going to be a hybrid solution, right? So you know, the classical HPC is not going away, and I think that's part of again the challenge, right? You know, how do we bring people to this journey, and you know, the accountants and CIOs don't freak out and say, you know, we spent all these tens of millions in data centers. What are we going to do with this? You know, so
yeah, those are the challenges, as well as integrating somehow a quantum machine and a classical machine. Yeah, and it's important to have these conversations too. And Amrita, taking on one idea that Cam mentioned in his explanation is the concept of quantum chemistry. And I'm asking this because it's actually a particular curiosity of mine. There is a lot of talk about it is crucial to know the molecules lowest energy state, but why is this lowest energy state so important, and how does translate into better understanding of chemical reactions?
Yeah, sure, Esperanza. So I would say that I'm not a quantum chemistry expert, but I'll try to answer this question in the most simple way as possible. What happens with the energy states? I mean, atoms resides in, you know, many configurations. It can be in your ground state, it can be, you know, in a transitioning state, and then it can be in your higher excited state. Whenever an electron in an outer orbital, you know, in an atom system, for example, if you talk about a system, releases or absorbs any sort of energy, it either comes down to the lowest energy level or the lower energy level. If it, you know, absorbs some sort of energy or, you know, by any sort of force, then it goes up to the higher orbital, you know, or higher energy levels. Why it is important to have the lower, you know, the system to be present in the lowest or the lower energy format is, you know, scientists will be able to understand the exact structure of the molecule in its lower energy form, right? And that is important because only then we'll be able to understand how it can react with the other molecule or the other sort of systems. And that is where the concept of understanding the you know, chemical reaction, you know, understanding how a new molecule can be created. You know, these concepts can be understood in that particular term. So, you know, we always talk about, you know, lower energy states of an atom or lower energy state of a system. That's where, because, and it's not very easy. It's like highly complex in terms of computation. I mean, I think there's a, you know, algorithms from VQE, like variational quantum eigensolvers, that is trying to solve, you know, the lowest energy states of the atom. And that's where I think this concept becomes very important. How it is like related to the macro level, I mean, you know, understanding and applications from one, you know, from the abstraction layer, it is very important in the drug discovery. It is actually very important in your protein folding, you know. These are very, I think, computationally very complex terms to understand. And I think like Cam and Gopal were kind of pitching in that, okay, these are not something that new things. I think we haven't reached to that level. I mean, we are still in that research phase of, you know, enhancing these concepts. And that will totally, you know, gonna make sense when we do, you know, advanced level of precision medicine and advanced level of drug development.
Yeah.
You know?
Thank you so much, Amrita. I'm seeing things much clearer. And
yeah, I hope.
Absolutely. And I'm sure for many others in the audience who, like me, were reading about this and wondering how does this translate? And thank you so much. So enlightening. And related to what we were talking before, I have a question for Matt related with the awesome partnering of the Cleveland Clinic with IBM. When we all read that news, we were also excited. And it combines artificial intelligence, cloud technologies, and quantum computing. And how does the fusion of these technologies further the mission of the Cleveland Clinic, who, by the way, are going to be the first guys to have an on-premise quantum computer?
Yeah, don't you just want to grab your cell phone, run over there and take a quick selfie right by there, just so you have one, and then have them sign it, all the guys in the room? You can put that on your wall. The first one is like the big computer. So I'm going to double down on what Cam said and probably what Gopal had alluded to in a while back, and that is that quantum in and of itself, by itself, without touching any other, being fused in any other technologies, isn't going to do it. It will always be combined with some other facet of technology in that classical quantum relationship, because, and we'll kind of allude to this later. I think I've got a presentation that covers some of this, that there'll be wholesale domains are very thin that go completely quantum. Usually you're taking a look at a part of a domain, and that's going to be integral when quantum fuses together with all kinds of other technologies to do its thing. So what can it do? Well, it can augment certain processes out there that that you have, AI, cloud, all of those things. They may have a part in a longer sort of ops, DevOps, kind of a model ops, quantum ops kind of a process. If you want to throw around the metaphors, that's one of the things. Or it can enhance. So there's augmentation and enhancement. So if you look at machine learning, quantum machine learning, there's some real big gains that can be done in there in the enhancing space. Yeah, I think that those are going to be the things you'll look forward to. And I don't just think it's AI and cloud tech. I think it's graph as well. I think it's going to be a lot of other technologies. And those are just the ones that we know about today. And there's probably a whole host of other things that are on the burner that haven't come out of the basement yet, that'll come out and be staples inside of 3 to 5 years. And you'll see them all fused together. So, Hunting, back to you.
Yeah, I agree with you, because very often I like to say that when we think about quantum computing, we speak about what we are able to see from this side of the event horizon, but there might be other things after that horizon that we might not able to see. Well, I have a question here from the audience, and I like always to make them participants of our discussion. And I will pose this question to all of you. The question says, can you share a use case or user case for optimization in trial design? And then Gopal, please, I don't know if you could share your views on this.
Definitely. I mean, of course, there is no industry use case. And obviously, this is because there's a limitation, the hardware limitation, number of qubits, quality of qubits, right? The gate fidelity and all other facts that it comes with NISQ era. So, but the proof of concept, right? I mean, what is clinical trial optimization? Is basically any other optimization techniques or the problem, and it's an NP class problem, right? And then we have some use cases which has been resolved by the NISQ era, the technique called as QAOA, for example, right? Or the QO problem, the quadratic unconstrained binary optimization. So clinical trial optimization is basically how do you select a cohort of a patient in such a way that they have a coherent properties amongst themselves, and they have a list kind of a confounding factors. Because you have only one molecule, and you are basically saying that this molecule will work for all the diverse population, and this is not going to work, right? To really, so that's basically, I'm talking about the personalized medicine, right? So if you really think the clinical trial design is actually a multi-objective optimization problem, right? So considering the properties, limited properties of the molecule that you have tested in laboratory, that this is a stability, this is a immunogenicity, and all the constraints that we have, we can then get the structure or the graph of individual patients, and also the group-wise graph, and try to see some kind of isomorphism of the graphs, right? I'm just talking in the technical domain, but this is basically in a graph problem, like the isomorphism between the graphs.
And also the optimization problem.
And it's a multi-objective optimization problem. Same like what we do in a simulation of the molecule, right? So that's it.
Yeah, great relation. Amrita, how do you see these?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, I really feel excited when somebody starts talking about graph and isomorphism, because obviously we cannot forget those concepts. And it has always been, with our next era computing or with whatever quantum algorithms we'll be using, I think graph is going to be one of the major concepts, even in your clinical trials, in your chemical simulation, in your optimization problem, in any sort of problems that I think we should definitely start with some sort of, graphical concepts, So completely agree with what Gopal is kind of explaining. I was kind of listening to him and I was getting excited. Okay, this is basically resonating with what we actually think about, right? So I completely agree.
Yeah, it's great to see the intersection of maths and then making a clear impact on people's life in drug discovery. Cam,
That's correct.
What are your views?
Yeah, so I kind of view this in a couple of ways, right? So there's the design of a trial, right? So you've just come out of preclinical and you're going into clinical trials. So how do you design the population cohort for a particular study as part of your clinical trial? But then there's data that comes back from that trial, right? And so the next step is, okay, how do we optimize? So we've tested in adults, and now we want to find the dosing for adolescents, right? Now, obviously, in some cases you can go back into a trial, but ideally you want to take that data and then model and see, if we adjust the population parameters, what is the dosing, et cetera, or potential other effects that you would study in a trial, right? And so there again, I think that's where a quantum computer and the approaches, whatever those approaches are, graph simulation, simulating annealing, whatever it is, right? But that's again where we can bear the technology to solve this problem of how do we stop going or not have to go back into a clinical trial. And that's actually the way that everybody talks, why are drugs so expensive? Well, drugs are really expensive because of this problem that we have to produce safe drugs, right? And so in those sort of phase 3 onwards part of the pipeline, if we can reduce the cost by having better simulation or better optimization, better modeling, then that will bring the cost down.
Yeah, absolutely. And also bring the cost down, which translate in more affordability, potentially shorter cycles. In summary, a huge, well, I don't know if huge, but a clear benefit to society. Matt, how do you see this question, this intersection?
Yeah, so I'm kind of on the healthcare side of things. I wouldn't put myself squarely in the life sciences side of this. So I think I'm going to defer to the authorities in the room for this. So I'm just going to punt back to you on that one.
Well, that's great. That's great, Matt, and it's a very intelligent position to do that. We are now around 5 minutes to the end of this panel. I'm sorry if we cannot bring in all the questions from the audience, but I would like to do a round with all of you to synthesize the idea of this panel of why do you think quantum computing is important to this industry, and then also how can healthcare and life science companies adopt this technology. 1 minute, please, because we are 5 minutes. For example, Matt, if you would like to take on these final remarks?
This one I can. These from the healthcare corporations. So probably 5 or 6 things. First, learn how to construct in the healthcare side of things, not on the life sciences things, because we're more conservative kind of thing. Learn how to construct a grassroots movement, because you're not going to get top-down dollars right away. That's just the nature of the beast. So figure out how to do it without taking any money and producing an ROI that the business can go, hey, I value that. So that's one. Second thing is realize that on the healthcare side, kind of differential, maybe hand in hand with the life sciences side, we're on the consumer side of that fence. We're not making tech. We're using tech to solve problems. So let's educate our people in the way that the consumer side needs. That's a really big deal, and an underserved, a horribly underserved piece of the industry. Third, figure out how to reach your executives, because executives won't fund stuff they don't know. And quantum is out in the I don't know by definition. You got to bring it into I know and can comprehend that. Fourth, educate teams of early adopters. Get people in your group understanding how the stuff works. You have to go down that road. And fifth and sixth, begin curating a curation of problems of note in your space that you're concerned about. That's really important. That really gets you off the ground. And then the last thing is get started on security POCs very quickly. Swap out RSA encryption, even from a web server to web browser with quantum safe encryption. Learn those best practices and get them into your security folks' hands, because that's going to be a big deal.
Yeah, that's the intersection of security Amrita was talking before. Cam, final remarks, brief final remarks, impacting final remarks.
So I think we've all sort of talked a lot about the promise and potential use cases, etc. But the question of life sciences and healthcare, sort of bringing that together. I think it's getting more and more important now. If you look at real world data, right, that we're capturing on the life sciences side to use to inform the next drug, right? So and Matthew touched on the medical IoT again. That's a huge problem, right? So we're getting data obviously from our trials, but then once our drugs are in the population, we still continue collecting data, right? We want to obviously improve and watch out for adverse effects, etc. Right? So I think that there is a marriage there around the data that we collect, and then applying the techniques. Some of them will be standard data science techniques, but enhanced by the quantum or the hybrid solution.
And speaking of data, Gopal, I need to look at you and please share your final remarks and views on this.
I think one of the problem in quantum computing in the NISQ era is how to articulate your problem, be it a life science industry or any other industry, automobile industry. How to articulate your problem in an industry that you are currently having a bottleneck with, right? I think that's the first step that every organization one should do. Make a POC, talk with many people. There are so many providers also. And the second part that Matt also mentioned is about the quantum literacy in your organization. I think there's a list you could do, because the quantum technology is not going to be yet another technology. It is going to be a paradigm shift, right? So it is very important that all your staff are actually quantum aware, right? So the quantum literacy is the best thing we can do right now.
Absolutely.
And articulate your problem.
Great highlights there. I couldn't agree more, Gopal. And Amrita, please, I'm so eager to hear what you have to say about this.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I was listening to all the points that everybody was making, and I couldn't more agree to it. The very first thing is, out of all I could grab is, okay, have that quantum literacy part in your system, especially for the consumer side of the market, because I have been working with Matt for long time now, and I know the consumer side of the market is the conservative side, and it's very important to understand. I mean, not the implication part of it. Maybe implication could be happening in a few years, but at least the basic education of quantum mindset in your process is very important. Second thing which I really see is start something with security, because with the Google and IBM roadmap of having this 1000 qubit quantum computer by the end of the decade, we are gonna be seeing an incredible and tremendous amount of shift in industry in the next 5 years. I mean, what I think. I mean, if actually this post-quantum cryptography concept is gonna break the RSA in seconds, which classical computers cannot break in trillions of years, I think that's a huge, huge shift. Even if it is happening in, let's say, next 12 years or something, I think let's start with something in data security, especially in the
sorry. And you are hitting the nail, Amrita, because we don't talk enough about the security side of things, and your point is so clear and so important to know about this. And well, we are actually a little bit at time or past time, so time to wrap up this incredible discussion with you guys. I can stay here for hours, and maybe you as well, members of the audience, but we must stick to the schedule. Amazing insights, a very polyedric view of this intersection. And I really hope that you guys and guys from the audience have enjoyed this as much as I have. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.